Final Fantasy 16 officially announcing DLC as well as plans to bring the game to PC are underway, and my question is, where is the patch for performance mode? If you're unaware, I'm currently 12 or 13 hours into the game. I don't have tons of time to game like I used to, and so I'm playing for like an hour a night, every other night, just sort of really enjoying the story as well as the combat in Final Fantasy 16. Very surprised by how much I'm enjoying the game. I did not expect to like it that much, given sort of the Devil May Cry influences, as well as I just don't have a long-standing history with Final Fantasy as a franchise, but really have fallen in love with the game and with the combat and the story especially. I just really do enjoy it. Not to lean too much into the trope about PlayStation only makes movie games, but I am sort of enjoying it almost like a TV show. Like, I think the way that the story is unfolding and how long some of the cutscenes are, they actually are quite excellent. But one of my main issues with the game is performance mode. Basically what happens is, when you're in combat, it maintains a solid 60 FPS because it implements dynamic resolution. What this means is the internal resolution of the game can go up and down. Now, that internal resolution is then upscaled so that the display resolution looks quite a bit better. Virtually all games are doing this. Now, you'll see people cherry pick these numbers and say, oh, I heard Final Fantasy's running at 720. There was one instance in one fight where the internal resolution dropped that low. A lot of games are internally running around 1080, and then they upscale to 1440, and you can't really tell the difference. A lot of the times people hear this and they're like, what are you talking about? There's even some great videos out there about upscaling technology and just how good it is. So it's not really an issue of resolution. I think a lot of people misrepresent that very often. As an example, Starfield right now running on the Series S at like 900 internal, and then they upscale it to 1440. So that's not a big deal. That's not something to like slam a game for. Upscaling technology has gotten quite good, and as long as you're playing a game, you don't really notice. There was a video once where the guy was showing you, like, you can tell a difference between like native 4K and upscaled 4K, but then when he started moving around, it was almost impossible to tell the difference. And I think that's really the thing that a lot of people miss out on, is the focus is not on native 4K or native 1440. It's about finding that sweet spot where you can sort of lower that internal resolution, use upscaling trickery to make it look really nice, but you're not actually having to be as taxing on the actual game itself running. And what happens in Final Fantasy 16 is, as soon as you leave combat, they turn off dynamic resolution, and it's very jarring. It's my least favorite thing in the game. It's my biggest criticism. I don't really understand the point of having a performance mode if you're not giving it to me. It's like you're only giving it to me in combat. So when I come out of combat, it's jittery, it's stuttery, it doesn't look very good, it's not a consistent frame rate. It's not like it drops from a 60 to a stable 50 or 40. It's all over the place. Major stutters and snags depending on where you turn, and it's not consistent. Sometimes I'll pan, and I'll be like, oh, that looked really smooth. And then I'll pan back, and I'm like, oh, golly, it's terrible. And it's especially egregious when you're in towns and when you see lots of people walking around. Now, they did say in sort of a series of announcements and things that have come out, they did say they said, rest assured, we are going to be working on the performance of the game. They did acknowledge that the frame rate issues were especially bad in the towns, and they were going to push out a performance patch to address that. Well, they have not done that. You know, the game, if we get to like the end of September, the game will have been out for 3 months with only a few updates with respect to performance. Like, they added that motion blur toggle so you could turn it off, and now they've added the ability for you to say basically transmog Clive's sword, because you may change the sword because of stats and then it doesn't look as cool. Like right now, I'm rocking a really weird looking purple sword, and I like some of the look of the other ones, but I switched because of stats. Like, that's a common issue in games, right? You end up looking like a trash can, you know, but it's all the stats are great. And so they added that. They added the ability to do some things as well with outfits and things. But then when they announced the 2 paid DLCs that are on the way and the PC release, I was really disappointed that they again said nothing about a performance update. There's speculation that they may be trying to get out of FSR 1. That's what they leveraged in the game, and FSR 2 would be a significant, uptick in able to maybe just navigate and leverage dynamic resolution in the game all the time instead of just in combat. Because to me, not maintaining the performance mode makes it sort of pointless. It's like, hey, I chose performance mode, so just give me that. It's my choice as the player. Protecting like the graphical fidelity of the game doesn't really matter when it looks bad. Right? If 30 FPS, in my estimation, makes really pretty games look worse because there's more colors, there's more distinct shapes and brightness and all this, and it ends up looking really extra blurry. I actually think Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, it's less noticeable that they run at 30 because the graphical, fidelity and the resolution, it's not as high, and so it's not as noticeable. But the minute you play a really good looking game and then you go and pan the camera and it's like stuttering, it's way more noticeable. I think it's generally because there's more information on the screen for your eyes to see, and that information is looking more interrupted as those frames and those stutters happen. It's just, I think it's far more apparent. And so I want to look at an article here, though, about what exactly is coming. This is obviously exciting because I think Final Fantasy 16 is a great game. But I was told by somebody that, hey, a lot of the times they do updates, major updates for something like Performance Mode. They'll do that with a DLC. Now, I don't know if that's true, if that's historically accurate with how they handle their games, but it could be coming with these DLCs. So the Gamer.com here saying Final Fantasy 16 will get 2 paid DLC packs and a PC release. They're saying, please let us play as Cid. Now, I'm already seeing people say, what on earth would we do in the DLC? I'm not, no spoilers, I've not gotten to the end yet, right? So I don't know what happens, so I don't know how neatly tied up it is, but I could see offshoot story DLCs where you do play as Cid, or maybe you could get a complete side story where you play as another major character that you run into, that I'm trying not to say any spoilers, but there's some pretty major characters that show up that have powers and would be really fun to play as, that would make for great, offshoot stories. So they continue on here and they say that Final Fantasy 16's producer Naoki Yoshida has confirmed that the game will be receiving 2 paid DLC expansions and a PC release alongside a free content update that just dropped today. So they pushed out that update like at the exact same time as this announcement. I went and downloaded it and I just tested out the game. I was like, ooh, I wonder if they baked in any goodies, right? Like any performance smoothness. No, it's still bad. As soon as you're not in combat, it is still pretty bad. And as somebody who really prizes the 60 FPS, I'm very disappointed that it is as it exists after all the marketing, after all their interviews about displaying the power of the PS5. I have plenty of games on my PS5 that don't do this, so Final Fantasy 16 needs to kind of step up to the plate the way the rest of the titles on the PlayStation 5 have done so as well. And they say here, it's hard to believe it's already been 2 months since Final Fantasy 16 launched, but as pointed out by Naoki Yoshida in a special video message, that's exactly the case. Yoshi P wasn't just reminding us how fast time is passing, though, as his video message was actually announcing a ton of new content that's being made for the games to be released at a later date. Now, I watched the entire video on Twitter. I really like Yoshi P. He seems like such a genuine guy. Seems like he just genuinely loves Final Fantasy, and he loves video games, right? During the one stream he walked into frame, I remember he had a Nintendo Switch in his hand and he was playing Tears of the Kingdom, which was hilarious. He had to play. It was like it just launched that day, and as they were gearing up for a stream, the guy's already playing. So he just seems like a super dope dude, and I really, really hope his care and passion is driving some type of an update here for what I feel is the most glaring issue with Final Fantasy 16. Now, I know some people took issue with the game, like I guess Skill Up didn't feel like it really pushed the envelope forward with RPGs. Maybe my love for the game is because I didn't play any of the others and I didn't have expectations, right? I went in expecting to not enjoy it, and I think sometimes that ends up being, the more surprising games. The video message was shared over on Twitter, and it features Yoshi P talking to the camera about the launch of Final Fantasy 16 and how the team has responded to it. After noting that everyone at Creative Business Unit 3 has been listening to requests from fans, Yoshida announced that a free content update for the game has been dropped, which includes some new costumes and the ability to customize weapon skins. So if you haven't seen it yet, it came from the official Final Fantasy 16 Twitter account here, and it was, a couple minutes long, and it had subtitles across the bottom there. That's not all, though. Yoshi P went on to confirm that the team has started development on 2 pieces of paid DLC, something that fans have been requesting ever since the game launched. No release window or date was announced for the DLC, but if it's only just started development, then it seems like we'll be getting in late 2024 at the earliest. Yeah, I'm not sure what development timeline looks like here, but it didn't seem to be anytime soon, which is why I found it to be strange. I don't know why you're telling us this now, right? Like, hey, we're making some DLC. We don't even have a release window yet. I think the PC announcement, which is coming up here in the article, that was probably a little bit more pressing for people that were hoping. His only comments up to now about PC was that it would not be coming to PC 6 months later. Many people saw the exclusivity thing of like, oh, it's 6 months. Does that mean it's coming to PC 6 months later? He's like, no, we will not be able to optimize the game in time. They really want it to be well optimized on PC. I'll be very interested to see how they handle the frames per second and performance outside of combat on PC. I think that'll be very interesting, especially against the backdrop of like showing off the power of the PS5, right? Finally, Yoshida has announced that a PC version of the game has also started development and that more information on it and the paid DLC is planned to be released before the end of the year. Once again, there's no release window given for the PC version, but it seems likely they'll release it either before either of the paid DLC packs. There's no way for us to know that. I mean, if it's not going to land in the 6-month window, I don't know if it would come before, right? In my mind, I think what we'll find out before the end of the year is likely release windows. And I could see them actually wanting to do the DLCs first, and then when it comes to PC, the DLCs could be bundled, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they just want to get it out on PC first, and then the DLCs can have like multi-launches, like multi-platform launches. It's an interesting scenario to have a staggered launch of a game on the PlayStation 5 and then the PC, and now you have planned DLC in the mix. Like, are you developing it for PS5 first and then you're going to port that later as well? Are you doing parallel development? I'm curious as to how that's going to land with respect to the timeline. And they go on to say here that the news shouldn't come as too much of a surprise for anyone who has been listening to what Yoshi P has been saying in recent interviews. He's already expressed interest in a DLC pack that lets controllers control Sid, and has even said that the team wanted to work on a PC release but simply didn't have the time. So these announcements are more a matter of when and not if. Right, and being able to play as Sid, I think a lot of people have expressed that interest in. There are certain characters that obviously have really cool abilities and it'd be really fun to play as, and obviously the voice actor for Sid made him extremely likable. He's one of my favorite characters. And they go on to say, the only question that remains is what the DLC will actually focus on. As I mentioned above, Yoshi P has already expressed interest in a DLC episode starring Sid, so that's a possibility for one of them. The other big possibility is an episode focusing on the only icon that we didn't get to see in the main game, Leviathan, which is something that fans have been speculating about for some time. So, minor spoiler there about what's not in the game, so that's not like a major spoiler. That's just something that is not in the game. From where I sit, what I would really like to see before any of this hits is that performance mode addressed. Whether or not they're going to move to FSR2, whether or not they're just going to let me have dynamic resolution all of the time. I'm not trying to be the armchair developer here, but I don't think you're protecting the graphical fidelity or the looks of the game when performance is all over the place. I really don't. Going from a fight where 60 FPS is locked and I have no issues at all and it's fluid and it's fun, and as soon as it ends and I come out, it's almost like when a car is, if you've ever driven with somebody who doesn't know how to drive stick and it like shakes, it's almost that feeling. It's every single time. It's very jarring, and it just doesn't seem necessary. Many of the areas I think still would be quite beautiful and quite stunning with the art style alone. I don't necessarily think resolution is under threat. I mean, the most low and most egregious dynamic resolution that you see is in one of the most craziest of icon fights where there's so much on the screen and it's so big in scope and there's all this stuff going on. So if I'm just wandering through the countryside or through a town, I'm not seeing anything that would probably require it to go down that low. If it has to go down to 1080 and it's being upscaled to 1440, games like Returnal have done that quite masterfully, and the game looks beautiful, the game looks striking. I've never ever once played Returnal and thought it didn't look good. And again, people cherry pick internal resolution and try to run with it as if it's the display resolution. And I think a lot of people are getting some good karma now that we're seeing Starfield's doing the exact same thing. I think a lot of these people were sort of trying to cheer against PlayStation titles, and I think a lot of them were just ignorant about just how much upscaling technology has been leveraged. None of this is a reason to slam developers or slam a game, especially if you can't even tell. A lot of the people that were talking about this just had no idea how the technology even worked. It was just a really easy way to say, oh, such and such game runs at 1080. And it's like, well, no, it actually doesn't. That's not the display resolution. Take 5 minutes, go to YouTube, search up how upscaling technology works, see the side-by-side comparisons. Virtually every time, as soon as you start moving around and playing the game, it's not a big deal. And I think the same thing about Final Fantasy 16, man. Give me that performance mode, like a real performance mode, not just performance mode in combat, okay? If we're going to show off the power of the PlayStation 5, you got to give me parity options at the very least with every other game that's come out. You can't be lagging behind after all those interviews bragging about showing off the power, all right? I want to know what you guys think. These videos usually roll over into a members-only debrief. You can become a member on this channel for $5 a month, and you get into all of my extra content, so consider doing that. If you're not going to do a membership, a great way to not miss out on the content and maybe get a gifted membership is to hit subscribe and that bell button, and I'll see you in the next video.